hello to everybody. I wanted to look as if I'd rehearsed all this, but you're going to see my eyes looking down at my notes, so I'm not going to pretend anything. So, The Real Anne, Unfinished Business, is, of course, a fantastic ITV primetime documentary which tells the moving, sometimes upsetting, but incredibly inspiring story of Anne Williams, whose son, Kevin, lost his life at the Hillsborough disaster. For 3 decades, Anne fought the English establishment to expose the truth of what really happened and to get some sort of justice for the 97 who lost their lives due to the human crush at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield on 15th of April 1989. The film is a companion piece to the ITV drama Anne, which stars Maxine Peake in an incredibly touching portrayal of Anne Williams. And Maxine is also the presenter of the documentary. And in that documentary, you can see her incredible ability to sort of connect with Anne's family and friends, and all these people that were bound together by this awful tragedy. I don't know if people tuning in have seen the film yet. I strongly recommend it. I'm sure you've got some awareness of it if you're here today. And I'm delighted to be accompanied by a number of the creatives who made the show to discuss the film's conception, filming, and the broadcast. I'm also particularly pleased that we're going to talk about the vital post-production process, which is, an essential part of any program making that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Of course, much of that happened in Wales, which is why RTS Cymru Wales is hosting this talk. So I'm going to introduce my guests now, and if guys, if you could all sort of tell us what your involvement was on the show, and I'm going to do it in the order that I can see you. Presumably those of you who have tuned in see them in a similar order. So first of all, producer and director Ewan Roberts. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? And thank you very much
Very
for
good.
the opportunity to talk about the project. I was the producer director on the film. My background, I'm a journalist for nearly 20 years, worked in HTV, then ITV Wales, then BBC Wales. I've been making documentaries for the, gosh, 5-6 years now, really, along with those documentaries with this team of people that is joining us today, really. So worked on observational documentary about murder in South Wales, about police investigating murders. Myself and Claire and Raheem worked on the manhunt for Raoul Moat, if you remember, 10 years ago. And we did a documentary last year about Dennis Nielsen, The Real Des, in the similar vein to what The Real Anne was to Anne, as drama to documentary. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Claire, you are edit producer, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So my background is also in journalism. More than 20 years. I worked at the BBC for 15 as a reporter in Northern Ireland, and then I came over to England, and similarly like to Anne, I made documentaries for ITV then as a freelance producer director. So that brings me up to where I am today. So when I was asked to work on The Real Anne, it was an incredible honor and privilege, really.
Alid, director of photography, if you can explain a little bit about your work on in general and on this particular film.
Yeah, I was a director of photography on The Real Anne, and then before that, I worked with the same team that we have here on the Dennis Nielsen documentary, which was accompanied the drama that David Tennant starred in. And we all got together to do the Real Anne. I mean, my background is well, firstly it was drama in the sort of 2000s, and then I kind of went back to doing documentaries, and I've been a documentary cameraman for 20 years really, with also dabbling in sort of commercials, corporates, and anything really.
And Raheem, the editor on this particular program.
Yeah, been editing since the early 2000s and things, and over the years I've done various different topics and things, and this sort of, I've always wanted to do documentaries with a bit of a message, something with a bit more substance and what have you. So again, having done the work previously that's been mentioned, working on the Dead's documentary, and then also this one now, and I just thought, yeah, it's such an important story, isn't it? And I just, like I said, it's been an honor to get involved with that. All of this, we were touching on this, all of this was also edited from my home remotely and things. So yeah, it was a great project to be involved with.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on that, how people were working from home and how they were working through COVID, etc., which is a big story. But I'd like to come to you in first of all to ask about the commissioning process. It's already been mentioned, the Real Des, and how that was associated with the drama starring David Tennant. I'm assuming that it's a similar sort of thing, that this was attached, or it came because of Anne, the drama.
Yeah, very much so. And I think in recent years we've seen sort of a trend of companion documentaries to go with dramas. The Real Des and Des. Last year, the Pembrokeshire Murders and Catching the Bullseye Killer worked really well together, because the documentary inherited some of that audience really. And I think for Anne, the drama itself, it sort of finished when the sad passing of Anne Williams in 2013, and I think the sort of the execs and the production team that made the drama felt, well, there's much more history to be told about what her legacy was, and I think that's how the documentary came about. We had the task of finishing off up to present day of what Anne's work, and the other families, of course, meant, which was a new inquest, and of course telling the subsequent trials that happened. So I think it worked really well. I think, I think for us the challenge was to sort of make all that history, because you have to tell it all within 1 hour, really. And but I think, from a commissioning side, I think it sort of worked really well. 4 nights of the drama and then documentary, and for those who wanted to find out more, they could.
So did you go to the channel and say, hey, should we do this? Or did they come to you? How was it? How did it come about exactly?
So Will Productions, who made the drama, that sort of been making drama since the 90s really, and I think they felt that they wanted sort of to pitch a documentary, so they worked something up, and they pitched it to sort of Kate Techman and Sue Murphy, and commissioners of the channel, and they went for it. Why wouldn't you? It's a great story to tell, and I think for ITV as a commercial broadcaster, but with a sort of that public service remit, it was I think a brilliant commission for the drama, but also for the documentary. Telling such an important story that needs to be told, and all credit to them really.
Claire, I'd like to come to you, because I work in drama, so Edit is there to support the main production, but I think it's very different in documentary. You had to be engaged right from the start and sort of, in a way, dictate how it would be made. Am I right in saying that?
Kind of. Joanne was much more involved with the day-to-day filming, and I kind of came on board after a lot of that actually was done. But Joanne and I worked really closely together in drafting the script, and I had to get very familiar with the people that he'd interviewed, Maxine had interviewed, that he'd been on set with, and understand their story. And I mean, it was a very complicated story to tell, really. The drama had 4 hours and we had 1 hour, and aside what happened on the day and getting to the bottom of that, and to tell that, we also had to tell a complicated legal journey and fight that Anne had over 30 years. So it was no easy task. So Ewan and I got our heads together and spent many long hours, many weekends working overtime to get the script in kind of a decent enough shape before Raheem even was on, helping us with the pictures. So it was an incredibly enormous task, and I can't underestimate that really. And I think, if you don't mind me saying as well, the pictures as well, there was a lot of archive too with this program. Obviously on the day there were a lot of cameras there that sadly caught what had happened. So it was getting in and ingesting all those hours upon hours of archive, a lot from the BBC, a lot from the police. And then Anne, because of her journey, there was a lot of material of her and her 30-year fight. So it was also gathering all that material in to get a sense of the pictures for the programme too.
Well, coming on to the actual shoot itself with Alid, presumably you work to command from you, and is that how it all comes about, or how involved are you in the process, other than making the pictures look beautiful, of course?
Well, before we started filming, we went up to Liverpool, you and I, to look at some locations for several reasons, really. You know, one, you want sort of aesthetically nice sort of images, you know, which are nice to look at, but also like we also needed a location which was sort of COVID friendly, really, where people can come comfortable to be in, because we're talking about people who, a lot of them are of a certain age where, you know, COVID is a big issue. And so we wanted them to feel happy that they could walk in, sit down, do the interview and walk out again, you know, so we're looking for like large spaces, really. And also places that were open, because obviously we're filming last year between sort of April, and then we did some for a few weeks, and then we filmed also in the summer, so which, you know, conditions were slightly better then, but the bulk of it was done in April. And yeah, we sort of we looked at locations, and you know, we discussed how we were going to do it, because obviously different to normal documentaries, you're not just thinking about the background for your subject, but also Maxine as well. So it had to be somewhere where you could light both of them, you know, and they also separate them as well.
And just to jump in there, if I can, Aled, I think we had a sort of a discussion about the style we'd choose to do the interviews, and I think one of the sort of challenges we had was the channel was very keen that Maxine conduct most of the interviews, so we'd see her, and we were slightly constrained then about her availability and how we go about doing that, and that dictated the style, which, you know, when you come to make these types of films, there's various things: the sit-down traditional interview, which looks really good and worked really well for this film, or, you know, the actuality led, you go to people's houses and meet people, and that takes so much time. And because we had limited time with Maxine, we then saw, well, the best way for us to tell the story is to do those interviews in one or two, well, I think 3 locations in the end, where we could have people come meet us, and we'd sort of adjust the background and the set to film as efficiently as we can.
Speaking of Maxine, and apologies, Raheem, I'll come to you shortly, but I'm really intrigued to know. I don't know Maxine, I've not worked with her, but obviously she's a very accomplished actor. I've seen her in interviews, and she's quite a private person. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, being an actor doesn't necessarily transfer to being an interviewer. I mean, is this something that was not straightforward to achieve?
I think it was.
She was very knowledgeable on it. Yeah, wasn't she? You know, which helped you on.
Yeah, she was. To be honest with you, you know, she's not a professional interviewer. She's not a journalist, but she was great. We had to prepare briefing notes, a long briefing notes for her to sort of gen up on the subject and questions, which she followed and added to, really, and she brought a lot to it, really, and because of her experience, and she truly had immersed herself in the story. And the drama had been filmed maybe 2 years before we started filming our film, so she was across it all, read the books, so she was so well into it, and our notes sort of reminded her of something she'd done a few years beforehand. So yeah, it was a slight challenge, but, you know, it was great. And I think the challenge was logistically more than, you know, her ability to conduct those interviews.
Raheem, if I can come to you about your work on this, I mean, how does it work as an editor? Do you take a bunch of tapes and then make it into sense, or is it something you're much more involved in the production process as you're going along, and assume a huge amount of research before you actually start?
Yeah, I was going to say, with all these sort of projects, research is key, kind of thing, you know, because I wasn't really that familiar with what happened at, well, I think a lot of people would have heard of Hillsborough and stuff, but they don't know the ins and outs necessarily. And, you know, I didn't know much at all really about Anne's story. So it was just, you know, looking up, doing some research and what have you. But no, with this particular project, it's like what Claire said as well. There was just so much footage to get through, not just like the interviews and what have you, but the amount of archive and what that was there. And also the script was constantly from day one being still as it was handed to me. It wasn't finished, kind of thing, you know, as if I could start laying down the interviews and what have you. There was from day one just constant tweak, change this, because it was such a detailed story and an important story to get right, if you know what I mean. And because, like, as you know, as been talked about, it's covers such a huge span of time to get the best bits and the most important bits into our sort of 45, what was it, just under, actually I can't remember what the duration of the show was now, but you know, there was so much to try and get in and things, that it was quite a task from day one. Long days, trying to get the whole story and the script nailed. And then of course, you know, the tone of the entire show as well, because you can't, it can be, sometimes it can almost be a little bit of a dry subject matter if you're talking legal stuff. So you have to try and make that entertaining at the end of the day as well, watchable, if you know what I mean, for a TV show. So a lot of time was spent crafting the entire show, you know. So yeah, that was quite a challenge.
I mean, I think you achieved it. It was, we were saying beforehand, before we came online, I found it incredibly moving, but sensitive, and yet uplifting as well. And I think a lot of that is down to the brilliant choice of contributors. I don't know if it's more of a Ewan question, but how did the choosing of the contributors come about? And was that straightforward, I guess?
You know, I think we were looking for individuals to represent various things in the storytelling. We wanted people that could tell what happened on the day. Clearly, we had to say what happened then. Also, people who knew Anne, family members, and those who she helped along the way. And Anne was seen as someone, you know, of course, she was looking for the truth about what happened to her son and other people and others who died at Hillsborough. Also, she was there, a great supporter of those survivors who went through so much, still going through terrible times now, really. So we were looking for individuals that could talk about those different aspects of things, and myself, the exec, who was the writer of the drama, Kevin Sampson, a brilliant writer, and you know, a man who knows the subject, you know, so in detail. He was there, and also the assistant producer, Dan Kay, who co-wrote a book about Anne Williams. So these individuals knew the people that we need to go and talk to. So we went, you know, many days talking to different people, and sort of, you know, I wouldn't want to use the word casting because it was much more intimate than that. They knew while we were talking to them, and we were trying to find that right mix of people, because, you know, 46 minutes is not a long time really to fit it all in, really. And you know, I think we achieved it. I think, you know, and you know, Sarah, Ann's daughter, had to be in it, and she did, you know, such a powerful interview to talk about her mother and the huge toll Hillsborough took on the family, really. So I think we did achieve it. And, you know, Val Yates, who survived Hillsborough and was helping people in the field, you know, we took her back to Hillsborough for the first time, really, and that was such an emotional moment. But she represented, I think, a large proportion of those who died weren't from Liverpool. They were from outside the area. You know, Liverpool has a huge fan base now, and it did in the 80s. So that's why she was there. She had this really personal story to talk about when the inquest was happening in Warrington. Sarah gave Val her wedding ring, Anne's wedding ring, that gave her strength to go and talk in that witness box. And all those little stories help you sort of, oh yeah, that's a great story to tell, you know, and that's why we selected her, you know, and very similar with the others as well.
Obviously, the archive footage and the news footage is at the heart of it. Apologies, Alid. It's a huge part of what goes into making it. There's so many questions I have about sensitivity, but I imagine clearances alone, Claire, must have taken up a huge amount of your time.
Yeah, there's probably two main points on that, really. So the BBC Sport owned all the footage, well, the majority of footage inside the stadium that day. So we had to go through their BBC editorial policy to make sure that they were happy with the shots that we were using in the programme for multiple reasons, really. Taste and decency, privacy, etc., which is the right thing to do, obviously. And then there was police footage, which had more freedom to use under the 1986 Defamation Act, because we could just use that with more freedom without having to go maybe through the same type of level of clearances. So between both aspects of those archive, I think we're able to show maybe what other documentaries hadn't really done before, was kind of what had happened in the pre-match and then in the build up to the game, and then the game and when the actual crush happened. And that took a lot of research in terms of accuracy to make sure that all the pictures filmed that day aligned properly, and that we were actually telling the truth of actually what went on that day. But yeah, it took about maybe 3 or 4 months to get some of those pictures in. And obviously there were a lot of documentaries that have been made over the years too. And for our due diligence, we had to watch a lot of them too, which was important.
I should say to anybody who's tuned in, as it were, please feel free to use the chat box to ask questions. And if there are great ones as we're going along, I'll ask them. Otherwise, we'll come to them at the end. Aled, I want you to geek out a minute. I'm sure you have no problem doing that, because there were people that will be very keen to know about the technical side and in particular equipment. What sort of background can you give about the equipment that you used when you were shooting this?
Well, I used the Sony FX9 camera, and then for the interviews, we had 2 cameras on the person that we were interviewing, which was the FX9 on a tight shot, and then an FX6 on a Rhino slider, sort of getting that slight movement in. I thought it would be kind of, instead of the interviews being too static, I was quite keen for everything to be kind of slightly moving. So, and there are also some tracks in some of the wider shots as well. So yeah, a bit of movement on the interview is what I was aiming for there. And also we had cameras then on Maxine herself. We had 2 cameras on her, and sometimes a profile shot as well. So yeah, it was kind of, I had a camera assistant, obviously, helping me out, and because there was sometimes we'd have quite a few interviews to do in a day, like 3 or 4 in a day. So, and then we had to like change the location slightly in order for it to be slightly different background for both of them then. So, and then on the we also on the sort of shots where we're doing Maxine on location in Hillsborough, I hired in these beautiful lenses. They're kind of uncoated super speeds, Zeiss lenses. They're very wide aperture, but they're kind of from the 60s, 70s, and they kind of this wonderful flair with them. I first came across them when I was doing some promos on Sherlock, and the DOP there. He insisted on having these lenses, and I was kind of slightly intrigued about why he wanted them. So I had so I was shooting the promos to go with Sherlock, and so I hired those lenses in, and then I suddenly realized, oh my God, these are amazing lenses. So I mean, for the last sort of, I don't know, I would say 10, 12 years, whatever. If I've got like a really important job in, I'll hire them in as a set of them, sort of 15. 25, 35, 15, 85, and they are amazing. I've taken them with me all over the world. I mean, I've been shooting commercials in Australia and China and stuff with them, and they do. It's always, when you're talking about cameras and lenses, I think it's the glass that kind of makes a difference, really.
Raheem, over to you now. In the olden days, you'd have been up in an Avid in the production office, I guess, and you'd have had Claire and Ewan popping in all the time to see what you're doing. Obviously, it's very different now, working from home. And I will come and touch on the whole COVID issue. But how did this have changed your work? Did it give you more freedom to get on with stuff and then present an assembly, a rough, etc.?
Yeah, we were screen sharing. Is that right? I was. That's it. So Claire could always see what I was. Basically, I was cutting at home down in Cardiff, and Claire was sat up Formby, which is hundreds of miles away and stuff. And we never, during the entire process, ever physically sat in the same room during the edit and things. So most of the time we were just using excuse me, WhatsApp or whatever for our chats, for our video chats, and we'd have a call in the morning and things. But yeah, so she could see what I was doing, but couldn't physically touch the my computer or whatever's. And we just worked like that. And I think it works really well. And I absolutely love working from home. First of all, I mean, the commute is one of the biggest things that I hate about going to work. Going to work, it just, I find it such a waste of time. The other thing is with this kind of documentary, because the amount of work that needs to be done, you kind of need all the hours in the day. So I don't really want to be spending, 2 hours or whatever of each day traveling back and forth to work. So I would rather start early in the morning before the school run and whatever you do, start, chip away at something, get the work started. And then also I can work well into the evening. Whereas if I was sat in an edit suite, I'd be looking at the watch at like 7 or 8 o'clock going, well, I should be thinking about going home. Whereas I'm already at home and everything's here. So that was really, really useful to have that, because I don't think I would have got the edit done on time in the time that I did if I wasn't working from home. So it's definitely a definite benefit there.
I mean, it's an interesting point, and I don't want to step away too much from this particular film, but in terms of working practices, because obviously a lot of people watching this are in the business, and maybe Claire, you can answer this. Do you think there's a danger that we end up working more than we ever would now? I mean, I certainly feel I work a lot more than the hours that I did before, and I don't know how good it is for my work-life balance. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think maybe you're slightly conscious. You don't want anyone to think you're not doing any work, so you put more pressure on yourself. But talking about pressure, Raheem mentioned there, I live in Formby, and that's actually where Anne was from. And it's a coincidence that I was asked to do this, but I think living here in Merseyside, everyone's either a Liverpool or an Everton fan. So I think for me, that made it hard for me stepping outside of my house really sometimes, because I wanted to do the people of Liverpool proud in making this program, and I wanted to get the story right, and I wanted to tell it properly for Anne. Sarah, her daughter, still lives in the village. I kept when I was making this, I bumped into Alan Hansen, who was one of the players, sadly that day. And Sir Alex Ferguson lives in the next village. Stephen Gerrard lives in Formby. So I was holed up here for like 2-3 months, trying to get that story right, because I just really wanted to do, as I say, the people of Liverpool and the fans justice, really.
I mean, coming back to that point, again, over to you, Aled. Anne's story is incredibly moving. You must have felt a duty not only to tell her story accurately, but there's obviously a lot of requirements to be as balanced as possible, and to be open to the various sides of the story. I mean, in some respects, I guess this story is complete in some respects, which might make it easier. Did you feel a great deal of responsibility to make sure everybody involved felt that they had been able to tell their story truthfully?
Yeah, I think it's Ewan's best at answering that. I mean,
sorry, I meant to say Ewan. Did I say? I'm looking. See,
but
I'm
it is,
if we were in a room, it would make sense. Sorry.
Yeah,
it's a question for Ewan, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm sort of there, to obviously, back Ewan up, and sort of be sympathetic to the people who are filming. I mean, obviously they're looking over towards me when they're talking as well. And I'm, when we were in Anne's house with her daughter, I went in there on my own because of, COVID restrictions and stuff like that. So I also have a relationship with everybody that we filmed, because I'm the closest person to them quite often. But, for the bigger picture, then, it's over to you, Anne, really, for that sort of answer.
Yeah, I think it is a challenge. I think you want to do best by the people that you interview and represent what their feelings is as best you can, really. And I hope we did that. I think the feedback we got from the contributors, the people who are willing to sort of, go on camera and share these personal moments and, some emotional moments, from many of them, really. We're really grateful for that. And I think, it's down to, in this particular program, is the relationship that World Productions and the team that made the drama had with many of those contributors who were part of that process, and also where we are then an extension of what they were doing, and I think that showed on screen really, and in the wider picture, and Claire sort of alluded to it, or sort of talked about how complicated the legal issues and also the onus on us to be fair to the story, and represent, of course, we're sort of telling our story and their perspective, but we still have to be then, follow those guidelines set out when you're making TV programs, and that was a challenge in itself, I think, and all credit to Raheem and Claire who battled that in the edit really, and Raheem talked about the long hours, and it was long hours, I think, for Claire and Raheem to be able to pull it together and get that balance right. We worked before Raheem started the edit on a sort of a draft script, but to be honest with you, if we spent another 3 weeks on it, we probably wouldn't have achieved, as much as they did in that short period of time when they're really there, sort of putting it together. So, and I think it was done. I think it was, that challenge of 46 minutes of putting a sort of a Anne story and the Hillsborough story in a fair way was achieved.
I mean, that's a really good point. Raheem, Claire, I'm not sure which one of you is best to answer this, but there must have been issues of sensitivity around some of the footage, especially some of the archive footage. Some of it was censored visually, and I guess there were choices that you had to make or were made for you. Is that the case, and how did that come about?
I think it was getting the balance really on that. You wanted to show the enormity of what happened that day, so lessons could be learned and it wouldn't happen again. And Sarah Williams, Kevin's sister, gave us permission to allow us to show Kevin being pulled from the crowd and him lying on the pitch, which was incredibly difficult and hard for her, I'm sure, obviously. But I think she wanted people to see those pictures to show that this was a real person, someone who meant a lot to people, and I suppose indicative of what happened to others that day as well, really, again, to get across the enormity of what happened, and then the subsequent cover-up, then, the 30 years of a campaign for justice. I think she knew the importance of this documentary off the back of the drama, and hopefully it will lead to a Hillsborough law to stop this type of atrocity happening again, and and what we can learn, and with other inquiries going on at the moment as well. And I think it's important that there is a duty of candor with public officials going forward, and hopefully some good will come from the making of these programs.
We've had a question here from David Stevenson, and this is great. He says, "Hi guys, is it possible to say what the legacy of the doc and drama will be? Can you gauge the impact they might have made?" I mean, you both kind of touched on it there, Claire and Ewan, but I don't know if you can embellish on that a bit further.
Yeah, well, I think sort of Claire said it really well there. I think we in the documentary at the end we sort of talked about Hillsborough law, that sort of duty of candour by chief officers of organisations. They would be held criminally responsible if what they said would mislead inquiries or whatever. I think that's something really important that isn't there now. And the drama 4 nights, the documentaries went out on Thursday, and then there was a sort of an event in Manchester, I think. Andy Burnham, part of that leading sort of calls for Hillsborough law, which I think if there's a short-term sort of attention's been brought to that by the drama and the doc. So I think it's supposed to wait and see if something does come of that in the end. I think hopefully it does.
One thing that struck me, and I hope this isn't trivial considering the subject matter, but as somebody that works in continuity, Maxine's hair, it changed every shot. I'm assuming it was shot over a lengthy time, a lengthy period. I don't know who's best to answer that question.
Yeah, well, I think I'll jump in there, and possibly Alec can sort of contribute. I'm sure it caused some issues for the team in the edit, but yeah, it was shot over, 3 chunks of filming, and Maxine, a professional actress, is required to have different hairstyles, and I think one of the lessons learned for me is if you work with actors who are busy people because they're really talented, their sort of hairstyles do change. So yeah, it was a challenge, I think, for the edits, possibly, Raheem.
Well, yeah, that was my main concern. Initially, I was like, oh, I didn't really notice it too much. And there's some scenes where the hair was so different, and I think we had to physically separate in the edit some of these scenes because it would just be too obvious that 1 second, I don't know, there was some shots where she had longer hair, and then you can't just cut straight to the next shot where her hair's totally different and things. So, you know, it was just having to work your way around that, but it wasn't that bad in the end, was it? You know.
I mean, talking of challenges on a less trivial matter is the issues around COVID. Alid, I imagine that was particularly, and you probably have answers for that. This is presumably one of the first films that you've made under the different circumstances. I imagine it was very difficult. I don't know if you'd like to speak about that to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, during the first lockdown, we shot Des, and that was sort of, you know, driving around the UK. We were up in Scotland at one point, and we were in Manchester and in London filming, and there was absolutely no traffic on the roads at all. There was kind of really, you know, everybody was in lockdown. We had special permission to be out and about. But you know, and it was a new thing then. So and our contributors in Des was sort of they were in their 70s and some and older. So we kind of approached it in the same sort of way with this one as well, because this was during the sort of the you know the period of lockdown last year. Again, people sort of entered from one door basically. We pre-lit everything, made sure that everything was sort of like COVID safe. You know, we wiped the chair down and made sure that the distances between people when they were greeted were you know at least 2 meters. Everybody wore masks. Everything was adhered to, all the rules, and then sort of, but it was sort of making them feel comfortable, really, that they were kind of, they did come out of their sort of isolation to come to us to be interviewed. And we wanted them to feel comfortable, because it's sort of so yeah, we did everything we could really to do that. Hence the locations, you know, they had to be sort of as, you know, as big as possible, as wide a space as possible, so we could shoot it on you know, longer lenses, so that you know that nobody was encroaching them, and you know the sound person would be it was all boomed because we didn't want anybody sort of touching the closing with radio mics and stuff like that. So yeah, it was kind of it was difficult. You know, the whole the shooting process was sort of definitely not just that, because when you do shoot a documentary, you do you know, develop this relationship with the people that you're filming, and you know, you do feel sympathetic towards them, and you know, and it's, with the subject matter, you know, quite like this, you know, people are very emotional, and there's absolutely nothing you can do. Nobody can go up and give them a hug or anything, you know, because. And we just had to like leave them as they are, you know, because normally you would be sort of more sympathetic then, you know, towards the situation. So yeah, it was a difficult scenario to film in, definitely. You know, it did. I don't think it impacted so much on the actual results, like you know, on the film, but there when you're there filming it, you do feel this distance that's not normally there.
And just to add, you know, I think those things Alan described there were sort of you know, protocols that were put in place by um, our production manager, brilliant production manager called Kate Flanagan, who sort of worked with us throughout this period, and working with ITV Health and Safety, who, you know, what can we do in this period? You know, what's achievable? You know, within safe ways. You know, and you know, there was a point where Maxine and Sarah Williams had to have close contact. You know, and now they've filmed out. You talked about it before going into the house by yourself. You know, where I think 4 or 5 of the crew were just outside on the grass, but they had to have PCR tests because they were in close contact with each other to make sure that none of them had COVID. And yeah, the logistical difficulties of setting those up and making it happen, but it's worth it because what you get is sort of that closeness. took for granted before COVID came in. You know, having someone looking through, you know, photograph album or looking at pictures was, well, you just do that. Now, to be COVID safe, you know, it counts as close contact. So to be able to do that, you need to test people. Or back when we filmed in April, we did really, and I think it has been challenging. It's been, you know, but also I think it makes you think of filming things in a different way. So a larger location to film interviews, it can be more aesthetically pleasing than someone's small house where you haven't got the depth in the shot. So because we sort of forced to go somewhere where you've got an entry and then an exit, but the shot is got depth of field. It's just a more interesting location possibly sometimes. So I think possibly we've benefited from it and made us probably think a bit wider on how we do things.
I mean, I wonder what the legacy of COVID is. I feel and hope that we are coming to the end of many of the restrictions. Do you think there are changes to the way that we've worked that will carry on that are better or have changed things for the better? So I think that's one for all of you, really. I'm sure you've all got some thought.
I wouldn't mind just a quick answer on this, because traditionally, like you said, I'd have been going somewhere, physical edit suite and what have you. Like I did a job, I was editing in Birmingham, and that's where the job was based, so I had to go there. But now as an editor, the way the whole industry is sort of woken up to the fact that remote editing is actually possible to, you know, successfully do all these things and never have to physically go somewhere different. I could apply as an editor to more jobs. Because if a job's advertised, I don't know, Bristol, London, or even other countries, I can apply, and potentially I could work in different time zones. So I could do the edit overnight, wherever they are, you know, they might be sleeping. I could do a cut, and they're ready for them in the morning or something like that, you know. So I think moving forward, it can potentially open up more opportunities for people like me, anyway.
It's just your intention to eventually rule the world, Raheem, isn't it? You're going to edit everything. Raheem must start at the end of every show. I mean, Claire, again, you talked about how you're based remotely. Are there any other changes that you think have happened that will carry on regards, you know, other than location?
Yeah, I just think we're just going to, you know, operate digitally in a digital world more often, you know. But I saw Gloria's question there about creative differences.
Well, yeah, let's bring it up actually. So Gloria's asked, I'm assuming that you all know Gloria. She seems to know you. She's asked the question, you've worked together as a team many times before. How do you handle any creative differences that might arise, and how do those discussions make it a better program? I can't imagine any of you not having any differences.
Honestly, it's because I actually really get on with these guys on a friendship level that probably like we haven't fallen out because it was so labor intensive at times. But yeah, there were a few things that maybe Joanne and I didn't quite see eye to eye on, but not many. You know, luckily we did come together on most things. I think the opening of the program, there was discussion about whether or not we should open with Kevin's story or the wider story of Hillsborough. And then we discussed too about the balance of using drama in the documentary and clips from the drama, and should that be used as a device to illustrate who the characters in the drama were versus real life, you know, and the juxtaposition between those two. And then we both agreed strongly that Val, and going back to the stadium, I think we always felt from the, you know, the outset that she should be at the start because of the power and the emotional impact of her walking into the stadium. And then I think some of the execs maybe felt it should be in different places, and then some felt it should be back at the beginning again. But Joanne, I don't know what you think about any of those things, really.
Yeah, I agree. Most of the stuff you said, Claire, I think we all get along quite well, really, and a huge mutual respect for everyone's talents and abilities, you know. And I think it's, you know, there's 100 ways of making programs, as the saying goes, you know. And I think if you can have a discussion and be open, everyone be open to different ideas, you know, I think in the end it will be a better product for it, you know. And I really welcome critical feedback on the stuff I work on, because it will make you think differently and hopefully, you know, lead to a better way of saying something, or, you know, yeah, because that's what one is we're all in this game to make really good programs, aren't we? And that's why you sort of work with talented people who are free thinkers, who have got ideas, and you want people to be free to talk about it. And you know, if people feel there's creative differences and people say, no, it's my way or the highway, well, you'll never achieve that. You'll never achieve people being open to say, I don't think that works, and they should say why they don't think it works, and then you have a discussion about it. And I think that's always the best way forward, I think, you know. And this wasn't a straightforward program. I tell you, it was a really difficult program to put together. And, you know, Claire Rahim did most of the work, you know, to reach a point where, you know, I was looking at and sending my notes, and you sort of doing some of them and not others, and explain why. And then the execs came on and thought about, can we do this like this? And then the commissioners, and there was a discussion, you know, a really productive discussion between us all, you know, and we achieved, I think, a program that everyone was happy with in the end, you know, and it was a good journey, I think. So it wasn't an easy one, a good one, I think.
Can I just also add about the tone of the documentary compared to the drama? Because obviously, you wanted to feel that it's part of the overall, you know, the series kind of thing, and not be totally standalone and a total different feel to the actual drama. And a lot has to be said for the music. We had a great composer, Rob Lord, who composed the music for, and it's very rare to have an actual composer for the entirety, pretty much, for the documentary, because most of the time I'm using library music or what have you. So initially, in the first sort of several drafts, I would be using library music, as I always do, and think, right, this music works well, and then we'll send it to Rob and he will interpret it or put his spin on it and things. And honestly, the end result is just, it lifted the program, and some of the scenes, it's like, what I think, oh, this is a great piece of music here, you know, this works really nicely. He'll put something else in, and I think, this is brilliant, this is even better, you know. So it was great to have Rob on board, and also I was just thinking the scene that I cut with Val going back to the stadium was actually one of the first things that I edited of the entire documentary. Excuse me, where I thought, oh, this feels good now. This, you know, this actually feels like a bit of TV, you know, because prior to that, I was just essentially cutting the talking heads or just the interviews and what have you. So I played that. I remember Ewan popped in and I played him that little sequence of Val, and it is so powerful. And it's just, you know, having a simple piece of music as a bed and leaving those empty spaces of the stadium, you know, and all that kind of stuff to help tell the story. But again, I just think what Rob did with the music is really kind of, it's like the icing on the cake kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, I just agree with Raheem. I think Rob did a cracking job, really. It wasn't a misbeat throughout it. You know, it just complemented it so well, you know, and tonally, I think so right for that program.
I mean, as Raheem said, it's quite rare to have a soundtrack composed for a documentary. How did that come about? And at what point in the process?
Well, Claire, you know, I think you had to give us.
I think you initially spoke to Rob. You knew his work and knew how talented he was, really. And then he kind of, you know, he's a very talented guy, Rob, and he kind of put together like a template of like different types of mood music, you know, that we could maybe interject as kind of to give us an idea of what type of tone we wanted in the program. And then towards the end, Ewan kind of, you were speaking to him more, weren't you? Because you sent him the final cuts, really, and then once the final cut was done, Rob was then able to use his own creativity and editing throughout that and laying the music. Is that right, Ewan?
Yeah, it was. You know, I think you know, everything's a review and nothing's perfect from the offset for anything you do, really. So it's that discussion. Yeah, this works well here. Could we sort of have more intensity or less intensity at this point? And it's feeding back notes, you know, from what I think. And you know, they're not notes to sort of dictate them. They're there to sort of hopefully guide someone to sort of make it a better track or a better product in the end, really. And it is rare to get composed music on you know, sort of documentaries, really. You know, sometimes you get title music composed, you know, but to have it scored all the way through was really good, you know. But I think that was something that World and ITV wanted for this, you know, because it was such an important, not to say other things aren't important, but because it was part of the drama, and it had to feel like an extension of the drama a little bit, you know. And Anna talks about using those special lenses, you know.
Yeah, and we wanted
what to bring to it, you know.
And we wanted to use the music too, like towards the end, especially, you know, triumph over tragedy in a way to help that a little bit. Because Hillsborough is a story we've all heard of, and especially if you're a certain age, you may have watched, as I did, you know, Grandstand that day. So it is a story that has followed up, you know, we've all grown up with, really. So the music really played a huge part in driving the drama and driving the emotion under making the documentary as well.
Talking of triumph over tragedy, I don't know who's best to answer this, or maybe all of you. Was there a sense that, although Anne didn't live to see the outcome, if we are at the outcome, do you think there was a sense that she knew it was going to happen this way? That, you know, the things would be overturned, or
she lived to see the original inquest quashed at the High Court in December 2012, which then would lead to new inquests called, you know, and she knew that, and I think, you know, it's really hard to know. I don't know, to be honest. I think she knew things were going to change.
I mean, I noticed a change, like when she was being at that decision outside the courthouse, you know, she's in the wheelchair. She actually looked as though a weight had been lifted, maybe, and you know, her face looked happier, and she looked at more at ease, I think, you know. And she said that, you know, Kevin would be dead proud of her, you know, and so I think she maybe did get a sense that, you know, maybe not justice, but certainly the truth was there, no doubt, you know.
And one of the main sort of factors that drove her was that cause of death on Kevin's death certificate, you know, accidental, and you know, with the quashing of the inquest, which she knew that would change down the line, you know. So you would hope that, you know, she would have, you know, knew that, and sort of when she did pass, there was something on her mind. You'd like to think that, you know.
A reminder to everybody, because we'll be winding up shortly, do get questions in. Use the chat button to ask any questions you've got. Whilst we're waiting to see if any questions come in, I have to ask, is this a Welsh programme? There's enough Welsh names and places there. Would you be able to nominate for next year's RTS Awards? I don't know how this works.
Yeah, I mean,
isn't it?
West.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I think you know, it's a British story, it's a UK story, isn't it? It's made by some, you know, a Celtic crew, I suppose, Claire. I would say, really. But yeah, I think there's many Welsh names attached to it. You know, edited in Cardiff, you know, in Gorilla, and you know, graphics by Rough Collie, you know, in Wales. So, you know, there's stronger Welsh elements, you know. So we'll have to see what the RTS criteria is before we.
I'll double check.
I think there is one of them is made during lockdown, isn't it?
There is, yeah, but unfortunately that's for 2020. So yes, I'm sure we'll work a way to do it.
Fine.
Sorry, Claire, did you have a question? I saw no.
Oh no, I was just thinking the Real Des, because we made that in 2020, didn't we?
Yes, you've got weeks left to enter. Make sure that goes in. That should definitely, I'm sure, qualify. We're coming to the end of this now. I guess I'd like to. I'll come to you in the same order again and ask you what you learned from this process, whether it is a production thing or something from Anne's story. If you can each give me something that you feel that you have learned, you've come away from this production knowing now that you didn't know before. Sorry to throw that on you so quickly, Ewan, but to come to you first.
It's fine. I think there's many elements of things I think I'll take away from being part of this project. I think firstly, the enormity of it. I think I was conscious that when the world asked me to work on this, what a huge privilege it is, but also a very daunting task to do the best I could with the team for Anne's story, and also the difficulties that we faced. You know, I think mainly when we were sort of scheduling editing time, I think we slightly underestimated what was needed, really, because of the huge complexity of it and the huge amount of archive, and you know, all credit to Claire and Raheem for sort of working weekends and extra hours to sort of fit everything into that, and I think personally, from looking at Anne's story, I think, you know, you don't realise the difficulties ordinary people faced against adversity of sort of the English establishment, the British establishment, that sort of just wanted to sort of Hillsborough to go away, really, and what happened there, and the battle, you know, Anne represents many families, you know, but she's one of the most prominent ones there, and that's, you know, one of the reasons we did a story. But you just, it's incredible what she achieved, you know, to a huge sacrifice to her personally and to her family. So I think taking away is that sort of huge respect I have for Anne and all those Hillsborough families and those amazing survivors, you know, who just, you know, battle what they went through to this day still, you know. So yeah, I think that's what I would take away from it.
I mean, I'm sure you've answered for all of everybody actually, but I would like to see if there's anything, Claire, for example, that you feel that you particularly took away from your experience.
No, I don't think I could have put it any better than Yuan, really. I mean, I did work long hours and stuff, and I think maybe trying to get that balance as a working mum, because I just hear my daughter in the background. That's why I had to shut the door. But yeah, I just wanted to do the people of Merseyside and Liverpool fans proud, really, and also, you know, that lessons they, you know, could be learnt, really.
Alid, anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, I must say, the filming process, meeting the people that you see on the screen, and they were all amazing. They were all very articulate. They were, you know, measured, and just sort of so giving, really. You know, they didn't hold back, and they were just all wonderful people. Or everybody that we met, it was kind of it's very emotional being behind the camera. Being there, witnessing them going through some of the most, you know, awful experiences you could ever imagine, and you know, living with that as well, and you know, they were very open about their feelings, and it was very touching, you know, and very emotional, just being part of the film crew, basically.
And Raheem, over to you.
Well, a lot of points being covered, isn't it? So, but I feel the same way. It's like how Claire said as well, to sort of give justice or do the best possible job for the story. And again, like I said at the start, I wasn't that familiar with the Hillsborough story, but through the time spent on the documentary, you know, to find out all the various things that went on, and you just want to, like I said, do the best possible job. One thing that I did actually see was looking at the archive footage, because I've got young children, and there was one particular clip, and when you see what actually happened, that really did hit home. And I remember sort of being just in my room as I was cutting, and it all of a sudden hit me like how horrific it was as a parent myself. And I thought, man, if this happened, I don't know how I would feel if that happened to me. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's just to see all the terrible suffering that happened and what those people went through. So yeah, I thought I would just try and do the best I could with this documentary, really.
We've come to the end of our hour. We're a minute over. I'll have to negotiate with the channel. No, seriously, thank you so much for your time. I mean, your legacy truly is the sensitive approach to a very difficult story, an expertly made program regardless of the subject under difficult situations. And thank you all for your time. I hope that we'll do this again with whatever you all embark upon next. But for now, yes, have a look at if you can nominate something in for the RTS Awards. Thanks everybody. Thanks everybody for tuning in. This will be available on the RTS YouTube channel at some point as well. And bye for now. Thank you. Bye-bye.